Let us get into it. The speculation on working life in the 9 to 5 as vaudeville. So, let us talk about it. To begin with, not only is it apparent that under the tying and the organization of a business, we all walk through those first doors, as we like to believe, as unique and contemplative persons, that from the advertisement of a role we find ourselves summoned into a world where our indifferences, whilst under temporary observation, are buried, only to find that the very nature of ourselves is permitted exposure in various moments. Its entirety must never be shown, for if it did, the reality that has been formulated by those consistent efforts of the marketing people, the CEOs, the directors, etc., etc., etc. They maintain this desire to keep environments professional and tamed. Otherwise, our nature would flourish like a flower. And contradictory, this is what they so-called desire at the same time, despite putting those limitations on us. As soon as we walk into the environment, it's if we was to navigate this as metaphorically as a blossoming like a flower, we would be annihilated instinctually and immediately by the managers, the team leaders, the etc., the CEOs, or whatever. Here, one would be forced to leave this sort of stage that's been employed, and not with an applause, with their head turned to their ground as we do, with the occasional utter confusion as to why, for the sake of authenticity, being exposed in a riddle through this team management process. In short form, they've just removed from an experience ourselves. We've been removed, where many of the humans are still experiencing that same game, so to speak, without themselves. Under this farce of working environments, there is a consistent drive for the collective to purge the possibility of this tragic comedy manifesting in its completion. The role one plays in these environments shields the possibility of the secret breaking, the light of day and be seen. This is the heart of the creed of a team of employees, all of which understand the thing that they are committed to performing for the overall improvement of something that has nothing to do with themselves is fundamentally, as we say, it's a tragedy waiting to emerge, to which they register its appearance in allocated time frames and through the closeness of so-called mutual relationships that sprout in canteens, changing rooms, hidden places on the work floor, and the like. That's pretty obvious. You can go to these places and there's always that hearsay. You find yourself talking with individuals who the majority of the time they have conflict with the management process and the way that the organization itself is ran. That's an important aspect of this discussion. The nature of working is something that is not pursued for gains in happiness, we all know this, nor for an interaction with the divine. This is not a spiritual conquest when we do these 9 to 5 jobs. It is not something chosen for the sense of pleasure either. Though in various industries one can find pleasure in their work. You know, I'm not disregarding that fact. There is pleasure to be found in specific types of work, but not true pleasure. Not the pleasure required for pursuing goals or developing one's conscious activities. You know, in a working environment, everyone is coerced under a declaration. And this comes without question. This is a subordinate presence that arrives immediately. You know, in a working environment, everyone is coerced under this declaration. That in itself is a theme that is carried outside of the working environment, and naturally occurs when human beings are allocated in the same space at the same time. In its simplicity, the work environment is sustained by the commitment to continually lie to one another about one's spiritual stake in the world, at the same time simultaneously whilst blending in with the collective impositions that are presented to us. The farcical element about life is that we are continually striving towards endless things that are forever changing. Desires for the future, desires for the present, desires in their nature, desires. You know, future thoughts of this movement, the burdens, the memories of the past, which is fundamental to this observation as we will navigate. But as we acquire content in our psyches, we meet them head on with an aroused and partially skeptical gaze. These things that appear to us in daydreams, in casual thoughts, are taken as things that happen to us, rather than things that we create. This victimhood is installed from the horizon and is surpassed by acting out and both pursuing and harnessing the thing that had arisen. This, though, as we know, those that work these 9-to-5 jobs, and this is a shout out to the people working these jobs, is fundamentally a smokescreen. It is one's willing belief that they have surpassed and conquered the arrival of the process of the contents of their own thinking that leads to authentic understanding. Again, it's a comedic installation of acquiring something for the sake of acquiring it, not with any case, but simply to obtain the thing and eternally keep obtaining these sorts of things that arise. These things are strictly mental. The very arrival of this anomaly finds itself in every one of us. Every human being on the planet experiences this. As we gather under this so-called declaration and rules of the working environment, the truth of thinking and thought is almost forgotten. It's almost as if we cannot have our own thoughts. We cannot think for ourselves. This weight of the show is what preoccupies others, and the roles embodied in the show are not entirely consciously chosen by ourselves, nor the collective. This transference of the character of an individual upon their engagement within the environment is where I call the snatching of presence occurs. It's a mandatory conformity. It steals self as sensations appear, that hijack the body, to restrict the body to move in conforming manners, to apply to the job role, manners which reduce authenticity, reduce authentic exposure under the fear of losing the job. The theft of presence here is the presence of self that one knows and understands when they are alone in their own company. When you leave your job, you understand that you are indifferent to what you've just experienced. There is a separation that occurs. You are not this role that applies to you. This is the space that allows you to be with yourself, and we all understand this. But in the working environment, there is no space for one's presence of mind. It's always bombarded with the overall script that is induced by being performed. We're told to be this way. One is stuck in it. We have to partake in it to survive these sort of fleeting moments of the working day, just to supply our survival nature. So there can be no time to openly express what one understands themselves to be. Therefore, one must find a space within that script, but away from the other actors, the other folks that are also imposing the same thing. They're imposing the element of scene stealing. It is a theatre production. And to give some context on this, scene stealing refers to a situation in theatre, film, or television where an actor, often through their performance, charisma, or actions, unintentionally or intentionally draws the audience's attention away from the main character or the action of other characters in the scene. This is what I'm talking about. This can disrupt the balance of the performance, sometimes overshadowing the intended forces and focus on the movement and moment. These are subtle social pressures, or, as I suggest, the suppression of dissenting opinions. This is where I draw the line. I call this the theft of presence. This theft of presence leaves the individual to surrender to the aberrations of the social dynamic, where one can easily forget that they have a life outside of work. This is the complications of the 9 to 5. The entertainment one receives during the disassociation of this occurrence often results in finding the things their co-workers say overly funny, granted by the higher ranking members of the team and the organization. The falseness is not an immediate risk or threat to seeming out of character within that environment, but it is the same process that carries through the ranks of the organization. The team members are still applicable to this. This is the sort of creed throughout this performance of this 9 to 5. There is a sort of dialect that runs through it. It is the same artistically, appealing mandate that dictates the most suitable form of interaction. That's what we're getting at here. This interaction appears often in these 9 to 5s as a joyful interval, something that elevates and it's primal on its surface, but it can easily slip into sheer absurdity. It's a drive that compels the team to behave as if they are in a reality TV show. The cameras take the form of other employees in the circle who are not spoken to or interacted with most of the time. These folks witnessing the entire observation of this phenomenon that is occurring, and essentially it's a theatre production. An established circle of people has access to the most intimate form of information between the few within the company. Here the status roles manifest. This is where you find your often team member that's on the same employment level as you, acting more in charge in certain forms. The status of the individual is permitted by both their tolerance and their participation in the delivery and extraction of social life in the workplace. When one is told to be respectable and professional by, you know, the the people that are so-called above you in these dynamics, they themselves are obligated to act accordingly to the same protocols. One realizes that everyone is in the same show. They are following the same script. But each individual must be treated uniquely because it is acknowledged that everyone is different. And in today's world, obviously, we take that terminology a bit more elusive. This is the lowest, most superficial level that marks these styles of mandates. From this application of this mandate, roles and treatments are created, where some will be treated better than others. You know this. Snarky interactions can become more present if there is a more authentic micro-collective in the environment than casual strict role players. They've been truly convinced that the person they are in the settings of is who they are by destiny, and have been appealed by nature as some modern micro-thespian. It is from these mandates of installed humour and participation that the vaudevillian nature of working life becomes strictly chaotic and comedic. This mandate, which governs all centralized action and interaction, generates tribalism among the employees. How many times have you encountered that there are cliques? Each person lives within their own office culture, so to speak, developing unique traits suited to the environment, understandings, moral inclinations in rebellion against the suppressed freedom that the internalized workplace offers. Everyone is free to interpret the world as they wish, of course. And in applying this truth to the work realm, the mad undertones of the working environment come to life, fueled by the strange ties that everyone has to their job roles. The strangeness of these so-called mad undertones is where the internal quiet rebellions are submerged, making themselves known through intervals of imposed order. This becomes the incubator of a sort for anti-policies within the company, where everything that is acknowledged but for the sake of keeping the job, it is buried and ignored. That's what we do. We understand all of this, but we keep this internalized. It is essentially the unconscious storehouse of the company itself. The company is founded by a collective. And they organize these strict impositions, and yet, as in our nature, we rebel in our quiet formats despite being circulated by these dilemmas. So-called, let's talk about the receptionists. Here, they almost become whores, They are slaves to this pimp of the company. The team leaders turn into entertainers, the workers become background performers, the circus show is beginning to be activated, and the secrecy of the public ever discovering how life truly is as an employee at this company becomes the equilibrium for the social exhibition that takes place for only the select few. These environments exist in every physical building where a business is housed. That's a fact. We understand this. The nature of ourselves as human beings in our capacity to interpret the impossible and experience the impossible gives the operations of a business an absurd side. Often, the darkness of this reality is comedically charged. It's a tragedy, seeing humans slave away their identities just to get by in the world. In some ways, it is a dark romance of our motivation for securing the randomness of our desires. When they are placed under a declaration, as I lay out, as unnatural as the order of a business, it makes me wonder if anything is truly as it appears. You know, the conversations you have with your colleagues. And maybe all of this is something that says nothing at all, but in the end, we are made to work, exchanging our lives for the tokens of survival until the final curtain falls, and we welcome this ripened before the farewell, I suppose. I want to thank you for listening if you listened to this entire section all the way through. Obviously, this relates to any working individual that's in the 9 to 5, such as myself. I think it's crucial that we come to terms with the nature of this 9 to 5 environment. It is not an environment that is strictly something that allows ourselves to be ourselves. We are imposed with a declaration that we must follow. And so I ask you to think on this. Think on these propositions. Think on this idea. Think on the fact that we are welcomed into a business or a company, and yet there are roles that are subconsciously imposed upon us. Thank you for listening, if you have listened all the way through. I wish you the best, and I wish you life, love, support, and power.